To tell you about this now, research by Credit Bureau Group, TPN, has revealed that 38% of South African parents are behind on the payment of school fees. This has resulted in some private schools losing pupils. In 2023, some private schools reported a 40% decline in attendance, and public schools are reporting an uptick in the number of students who are registering with them. We're now joined by Lebogang Montjane, the Executive Director of the Independent School Association of Southern Africa. Thank you very much, sir, for availing yourself this afternoon. How bad is the situation?
Good afternoon, Dudu, and to your listeners. There is no question that we have seen, certainly after COVID, a saturation in the independent schooling market. From around the 90s, so basically from 1994 onwards, we've seen a steady increase in the number of independent schools starting up. And we're now seeing a plateauing in the market in terms of the number of parents that are in independent schools. So we also have historically, many of our independent schools have had long waiting lists. Those days are gone.
So we understand that at the end of 2022, less than 62% of school fee accounts were in good standing, compared to almost 64% at the end of the previous year. A slight uptick, but what's behind this? You mentioned COVID-19, but why is it that parents are not able to meet their commitments?
You see, I think that also the sample size, I think that we need to actually be careful about what that sample size actually indicates. Because if you saw that, it is basically for fee-paying schools, both in the independent and public sectors. And I think that these are very, very diverse. So we at ISASA, for example, have a requirement that our schools meet our quality requirement. And part of that quality is obviously sustainability. So we do not see that kind of large decline in a lack of fee payments in our membership. But certainly if you put us in the same pool as public schools or non-ISASA member schools, then you would see that kind of ticking up in terms of bad debt. But really for ISASA member schools, we have not seen any kind of increase in bad debts. Certainly during COVID, we saw that, but now we really are back to pre-COVID conditions in which parents are paying their fees.
So nothing to worry about where your members are concerned?
No, I mean, but the only worry really, and I think that you were talking about this earlier on, with the fact that we now have a serious energy crisis in South Africa, and also somebody was also talking about infrastructure, we are certainly going to see a knock-on effect, because the economy is not growing as quickly. This is obviously going to have impact on people's jobs, and that may result in a reduction in the number of parents that are able to consider independent education.
Meaning what for the industry?
Look, I think that there will always be parents that can afford schools, but also I think that we really encourage parents to consider this, and this is important. There are diverse number of independent schools at different fee levels. And something that people are always surprised to hear is some of our independent schools actually charge fees that are lower than those that are offered in some public schools. So parents must be able to go out there and find the schools that they can actually afford. So, but also I think that really some of our high fee schools, that kind of tier is often immune to economic shocks.
Yeah, Mr. Montjane, you mentioned exceptional outputs, right, by certain schools. Certainly the top-tier schools, you'll get that. And perhaps that is what parents are going for, right, because you want the best for your little ones. So the independent schools that are offering less in terms of the fee payments, are we seeing that indeed the output matches the standard, if you will?
No, I mean, so for ISASA schools, you all have to do quality education. In fact, I was talking to an international person yesterday. What really binds our membership is quality. And what is quality? It's not the fee, it is quality teaching and learning. And so really, that is what distinguishes a school. So parents have to understand that if you're in an ISASA school, you are generally more likely to be in a school that is offering quality teaching and learning. But so that is something that one must consider when you're going out into the market for your children's education. But also something to do, you must remember, education inflation is consistently higher than national inflation. It's between 2 and 3% higher, and sometimes schools increase the fees well above inflation rates and still are able to fill the desks. But I think that, as we've indicated, schools are going to have to work harder to get those parents to come in because the waiting lists are not what they used to be.
I do beg your pardon, but please indulge me. And so when you speak of parents working hard, there are some parents who are already breaking their backs so that their children can have access to quality education. Just maybe I don't even know how to phrase this, at a basic level in South Africa, should we not be aspiring to have a situation where this exceptional output that we speak of is accessible to everybody, especially in light of the future? How sustainable is this?
You know, Dudu, I understand. So, but I must clarify. I said that the schools are going to have to work harder to get more parents to come in and make them as a choice, just to clarify.
Okay.
But Dudu, we must understand something, that the model that South Africa has adopted for financing of education. You have in the public schools, quintile 1 to 3 schools, which the state pays for most, if not all, of the costs. You have quintile 4 and 5 schools, where the state pays less of the cost. And then you also have low-fee independent schools that the state also provides subsidies to. And also when you see, for example, provinces such as Gauteng and the Western Cape, every year there is a net gain in the number of families that are coming into those provinces, and the infrastructure to keep up with that kind of growth in population takes longer to keep up to. So who can assist in that shortfall? It's independent schools. So I think that we also must emphasize this as well. South Africa has done well by making sure that that all our children are in schools. So the Millennium Development Goals said by 2020, all countries must have all children in schools. South Africa has achieved that, and those goals would not have occurred if other countries were able to achieve that target. So the challenge for South Africa is to improve the quality of teaching and learning in some of our quintile 1 to 3 schools. Quintile 4 and 5 schools, brilliantly. You can look at their matric results, and if you look at independent schools, they generally do well. But not all independent schools do better than public schools. So it really is important for us to understand the complexity of the system, and that ultimately, when you look at quintile 1 and 3 schools where those parents are not paying fees, the kind of poverty, indigency that the state has to deal with is quite significant. So we really must be very careful in always trying to create the impression that the system is completely dysfunctional. It has a big way to improve, but let's talk about the complexities rather than be too simplistic.
Fair enough. Fair enough. What are some of the solutions maybe then?
Well, I do think that really for us is something that was really alarming. We in South Africa, about 80% of children, by the time that they reach grade 4, cannot read a sentence with understanding. We really need to emphasize teaching, and we need to emphasize reading, and do better in terms of preparing our children to start to read. And I think that independent schools and quintile 4 and 5 schools do very well, and also for us to be able to target those children who may have learning deficiencies. But also something that has happened, which is greatly exciting for educators like myself, is this. Until last year, we used to think that early childhood education is social development. It was with the Department of Social Development. It was really making sure the children are being vaccinated and are being fed, but we were not really worried about how do we get these young people school ready. So we are already starting to do the right thing. In fact, Minister Motshekga held a Lekgotla last week, and at that Lekgotla, they invited the Minister of Education from Finland. Even Finland, with a very good education system, only last year moved its pre-primary education to the Department of Basic Education. Now that we've moved it to education and we're looking at education, hopefully the system will start to show some of the changes that are necessary to improve quality. Because children from middle-class families, both in public and independent schools, when they get to grade 0, they're already school-ready. They know some of their colors, they've got pre-numeracy, and they've got pre-literacy. That is how we're going to improve the outcomes of our system.
Thank you for making us understand. Lebogang Montjane is the Executive Director of the Independent Schools Association of Southern Africa.